All right, here we are. Happy New Year, Common Sense Ohio, or you can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com. Check us out on the socials. Check us out everywhere. It is January 3rd, 2025, our first show of the new year, where I guess we begin again.
Yeah.
Yes, so
yeah, we do. Yeah.
So lots going on. Again, commonsenseohioshow.com. Check out the blog. Check out all the backlog of episodes. We're on Facebook. We're on Rumble. We're coming at you live on Rumble, in fact, and lots of plans for the new year. In fact, this is that time of year, or either at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, as businesses, and ours is a business of sorts, we sit and we do some planning for the new year. So we got lots in store for everybody who follows the show, I promise. And thank you for following the show. Please like, subscribe, share. Those who have been following know that we've got this format where we start with what happened on this day in history. I can only tell you what happened a couple of days ago in history. Ohio State beat Oregon in the Rose Bowl.
And how?
I think we should send a big thank you card to Michigan.
Yeah.
A big old thank you card.
Yeah.
My gosh, they are rolling on everything right now.
And you know, we sat here sort of melancholy after the Michigan loss, thinking Brian Day's job's in trouble if he doesn't come through, if something doesn't change. It did change. He did come through, and the team is like a whole different squad.
Yeah. He's letting them play.
He's letting him play, like they unleashed a little bit.
Their skills are showcased now on that field.
It's sort of like, you know, the pressure of the pressure of that is done, and now they got nothing to lose, and everybody had counted them out, so there they go.
Yeah.
And played great, looked great.
Outstanding, right?
You know. Yeah. So anyway, go Bucks.
It's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting.
Columbus is a different place when Ohio State wins. It just is.
True. Yeah.
You know, the bars make a little bit more money. The restaurants make a little bit more money. There's a little bit of
pep in the step.
Pep in the step, even on a day like today when there's snow and cold in the ground.
And the opposite is true.
And the opposite is equally true.
The next day after
you heard us here on the show. We were all pissed off and sad.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it changes the mood in the city. And for those other cities, like we don't have in Columbus a pro team. Well, we've got the Blue Jackets now, but traditionally we didn't have a pro team. So like Buckeyes was it. And, you know, I remember as a kid waiting to watch it on PBS or WOSU on Sunday, the replay, because we didn't have college football yet on TV. Anyway, that happened a couple of days ago. But in history, interestingly enough, in 1521, Pope Leo X, Norm, issues the papal bull Decet Romanum Pontificum, which excommunicates Martin Luther from the Catholic Church, thereby kicking off the Protestantism and the Reformation.
Yeah.
So changing Western culture really forever.
And interestingly enough, having had a Jesuit education at a Catholic high school, in religious class, in Catholic religious class, they teach that Martin Luther actually was right about a lot of things.
Well, he was.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have.
Well, I don't want to get into it.
We don't want to get. We don't want to harm your Catholicism, Norm.
No.
But you know, the church definitely had a lot of issues.
Well, there's some interesting lessons.
And he was
learn.
right about some of it. I forget how many theses he had, but it was quite a few.
It was quite a few.
Yeah.
And basically he was criticizing the Catholic Church for its practice of selling salvation, I'll say in my simple terms. Like everything had become sort of politically corrupted. The church was tied to...
It's called indulgences. So to have your sins forgiven when you went to confession, right? You had to make some kind of donation. And this probably goes back way to the sacrifice of sheep in the Jewish temple, where you did that. Even if you were poor, you would buy something, a bird, a pigeon, something, and you would offer it, a sacrifice. So the church, theologians took that way too far. And basically, if you didn't have sufficient funds, and of course, people believed, there was an afterlife. They believed that their soul was in jeopardy unless they had their sins forgiven. And literally, if you didn't have the money to have them forgiven, essentially you're going to hell.
You're going to hell. Right.
Yeah.
And to me, and the other thing he did is that I think this is before he was excommunicated, so not necessarily on this date, but Martin Luther, I believe, was largely responsible for translating the Bible from Latin into German, and therefore sort of sharing it with the masses. The Bible started to become more of a book that we could all read. You didn't need the popes and the clergy to give it to you spoon at a time or one spoonful at a time. You could get it on your own. And this to me is the difference between like religion and faith, where we can all now have the Bible. It's for us. It's not just for a governmental entity tied to the church to deliver it to us. And that to me changed my faith and significantly when I realized, look, it doesn't have to be tied to a church. In fact, we could have church right here, says Christ, with 2 or more.
Well, excellent, a real good priest, real good Catholic priests who believe what you believe, Steve, will say, like when they come into a new parish and it's their first day on the job. Or it's their last day coming in or going out, and they're talking about their relationship with their congregation. Good priests will always say, you're not to worship the church. You're not to worship me, right? That's idolatry. That's, we're here, it's not even worship of the Bible. It's worship of God.
Right. And this is why I can delineate like the scandals of any church, the Catholic Church with the priests and the kids and all that stuff. It's to me that is used by the dark side as a reason to reject Christianity in general, and that is a non sequitur as far as I can tell. But anyway, I think our founders sort of enshrine this into the First Amendment.
What's sad now is in Europe, if you go to Germany, both the Protestant cathedrals and the Catholic ones, they're all empty. Nobody goes to church anymore in Europe. I mean, it's
that's too bad.
Like they just reopened Notre Dame Cathedral, right? In
Paris.
Paris.
Burned. It's 2 years ago now, right?
Right.
Or 3, I don't know.
Probably the biggest group of people that will ever go there were there for the reopening. And, I'll bet like a week later when Christmas happened, it probably wasn't as packed. And it's just like that's kind of happening in
Change
America
is a coming.
Yeah.
Change is a coming.
Hopefully.
Change is a coming.
All
right. So we better hit the news. There's lots of news, terror on the horizon, and right in our front yard and backyard, as it turns out. So, I mean, in the midst of the celebration of the New Year, and I've been down to New Orleans for New Year's. Oh, for the Sugar Bowl. When Ohio State played.
Yeah, it is a Sugar Bowl, right? Not the Cotton.
I believe it was a Sugar Bowl.
Right.
Yeah.
When Ohio State played Terrell Pryor and we beat Arkansas down there, I went down there for that.
Nice.
And that was over the New Year's weekend. So it was like that sort of hit home. I saw that and I'm like, man, just imagine. You think you're young and in your 20s or early 30s or even older and you're going to just take a weekend. You're going to go down to New Orleans, enjoy the culture, enjoy the food. Right. For me, not the alcohol anymore, but the coffee.
Yeah,
early in the morning.
Sure, just the vibe.
And you're out. I used to love doing that. Even even in the crowds, the sea of people, I would sneak out and sort of walk through that sea of people and just do some people watching.
Yeah.
And there's a car barreling through, killing people. You know? And what I hate the most about this, and I'll let you take it because it is news with Norm. But what I hate the most about this, is the politicization of it. Where both sides are sort of saying, see, if it were guns, it would be blah, 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 blah. If it were this, it would be blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I don't understand why the whole entire country is not outraged by this in and of itself.
Right.
Right.
This is a terror attack, nothing short of a terrorist attack, designed to kill people, designed to kill our citizens, kill us.
Yeah.
I mean, this is outrageous on every level. And I don't understand why we're not united on this one.
Well,
like 9/11.
Yeah. If people cannot, so the Saturday Night Live audience, when Colin Jost does the weekend news, where he does all his jokes, he just opened up with the name of that guy who assassinated the United Healthcare,
right?
The Luigi Mangione,
right? Yep.
Right. And as soon as he said his name, there was this huge woo,
right?
From these, especially women, from the audience. And even he, as a comedian, looked out at them like, really? Like he's
this guy's a murderous assassin.
Right. Like, I didn't even get to the joke yet. It hasn't been that long. It's not like telling a joke about, Lincoln's assassination. But, it weirded him out. And I'm thinking, well, if people can't gather around the idea that was a heinous act and the putative assassin is heinous, I'm not surprised by it, Steve.
It's sad.
Yeah, same day there was an Intifada protesters in New York City that picked up on the assault,
like celebrating this crap.
Well, and we had talked about what if in Pennsylvania Trump had actually been assassinated.
Yep.
This is showcasing what would have happened.
I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
you're right.
There would have
People
been
would have
just.
it would have acted
There would have
as
been
if they
parades
would
in
have acted
streets.
solemnly, like, "Oh, it's horrible. The president is sad." But it would eventually emerge. It would seep out of the pores of the people
I think
that
this is an
happening.
example of it, and it's sick.
Yeah.
It's sick. Whether it was Trump shot or any high-level leader, like we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
sick.
what was it? Jack Black's band,
Yeah.
Tenacious D. That guy.
Tenacious D.
They were
That
touring in Australia.
Yeah, and he wanted for his birthday, "Don't miss next time."
Yeah,
Um,
the guitar player, and
Right,
then Jack
right.
said, "Well, that's it for the tour."
Well, I don't know that he would have said that, but he did say that because of the back. Like there was immediate backlash.
immediate.
Yeah.
And the cancel culture eventually comes for you, right?
It does
It
come
always
full-
cancels its own.
That's right.
It does. It does.
If you think
Yeah.
you're so righteous not to be canceled,
Yeah.
just stand in line.
Well, case in point, since we brought up Paris, old Robespierre during the French Revolution, the guy who invented the guy who implemented the wide use of the guillotine,
The guillotine for you.
he himself, right?
Right.
Had
Sooner or later.
Yeah. The wokeism came around and
It
got him.
always comes around and
Right.
gets you.
Yeah,
Always.
it sure did. They're like, we sort of want the monarchy back or something different than this. This revolution's gone off the rails. So we're going to blame you.
Right. And guess what?
And guess
It
what?
is the guillotine for you.
Off with your head, Monsieur Robespierre.
Right. You got that French attitude going on real well. That,
Oh, man.
that accent there. Yeah.
Norm loves the French.
Oh, who doesn't?
My God, after road racing a French, a Peugeot 505 turbo with a pro team,
Puzo.
my God, what a heap of shit! Honestly, the more they tried to make it more competitive, the slower the car got. We should have called the car the Escargot Racing because it was snail-like. So, I don't have any use for it. So today in D.C., supposedly on January the 3rd, which is today, there will be an election for the Speaker of the House. And he has no buffer. He needs 218. And Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrat leader in the House, is saying, you're not getting any of our 218. So the Democrats are all going to vote against you. He has one guy named Massey, a congressman from Kentucky, who says, you're a Republican. You're not getting my vote. So they have 219 Republican congressmen at this time. And he just lost the 219th. So now he needs 100% vote from the remaining 218.
Or just a Democrat.
Or a single.
Or
I mean,
Yeah.
hey, come on. There's probably
There might be one.
There always seems to be,
Yeah,
right?
there might be one.
You never know. But anyway,
but there's
interesting.
There's going to be more Republicans that aren't going to vote for him than Democrats that will.
Right,
Very
right. So
possibly.
it's balanced out.
He is.
But Trump wants him, right?
Trump
has
has
said, "Go, we're good."
I think
belatedly.
We're good.
He
Okay.
he said, let's not have a food fight now because I have all this legislation.
Right. We got stuff to get done, folks.
Right.
Let's not tinker
So
with
he's not
this.
the perfect selection for
Well,
all of you.
But who is?
But who can be?
Right?
Exactly.
It's like these are. This
Right.
is such a.
And people are horrified that he compromised with the Democrats on this continuing resolution. And I do have something to say, and I am horrified about I guess the big thing that they stuck in there. So the protesting Republicans got rid of raising the debt ceiling in that bill, which I think is good.
Yeah.
But what was included was $200 billion in Social Security payments for basically there's a calculation where your wife's income, if you're a government employee, your wife's Social Security is offset by what you're going to get, or vice versa. Depends on who retires first. And this was solved like 40 years ago because it was a windfall that the rest of Social Security recipients would not get. But they had this carve out just for government employees, and they closed that loophole and made it fair across the board because starting in 1984, many federal employees are now in Social Security. They're not in the government retirement program outside of Social Security. At any rate, they're giving those people $200 billion and in essence taking away the windfall provision with it. So all of these state government employees, all these federal government employees are getting this huge unpaid for, unfair, like they're getting a windfall that the rest of us are not going to get. And so they're really pissed off. And of course, Social Security is failing anyway, right?
And so help me understand the windfall that the rest of us are not going to get.
Yeah.
So you mean that because if my wife or my husband is not or was not a government employee, I still have the offset.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And they never paid in.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that right there is the crux. If you didn't pay in, you don't get out.
You don't get out, right? That's, that's the problem.
Isn't that the basic of it?
And look, I'm not even getting out what I paid in.
No.
Right.
Right. So my position on Social Security has always been very simple. Thanks, but no thanks. I'll save my own money.
They should have a form when you turn 18. Do you want to keep and make it a season? Like you get anywhere from between 18 and say 22 years old. You get a 4-year window whereby you could check a box and say, you know what? I don't want to pay into it, and I hereby agree to never receive any remuneration from you.
Yes. Look, I'm not asking to have it both ways.
Yeah.
I would just say no thank you.
No thank you.
I will conduct my own investments. I'd like to have my own money.
Are 18 to 22-year-olds smart enough, though?
Well,
compared to like if you were offered that opportunity when you're 50.
Maybe the first generation isn't. Maybe the first generation isn't, but the second generation will be. Sooner or later, it'll catch up. So, look, 18, they're not smart enough because they don't have to be. Yeah. And maybe
they don't get it. They don't grasp it. They're just ignorant of it. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Maybe they're ignorant of it. But look, if I were brought up on this notion that there is no Social Security,
right?
Then what are you going to do?
No safety net. You're going to save, or else you're going to starve.
Well, and I think we put way too much focus on that. It's supposed to be a safety net, not your retirement.
That's right.
So we really have that term.
We've ruined the initial
picture of it. Yes,
and
we've ruined the initial
what it was.
It was
never intended for the purpose that we're using it. It just you can't support the entire population.
I mean, I get it. I signed up when I was 62. That's the earliest you can do it.
Right.
And I get around $1,000 a month, and because of cost of living adjustments, I think now it's up to like $1,200 a month. And like you can't live on that, right?
No.
I mean,
no. I mean, it may cut some.
That's grocery.
A little bit of grocery, or
maybe for like a single. Dude.
Maybe in the prescriptions a little bit.
A little bit,
maybe.
Right.
But yeah.
Look, I remember being 21 years old or 18, 19 years old, getting out of 21, getting out of college, thinking, look, maybe this was published or maybe it was in the news, maybe it was somewhere else. But I remember talking to people, a buddy of mine who's now a financial planner or who was a budding financial planner at the time. It's like, I don't anticipate anything.
Yeah.
Nothing.
That's right.
I count on nothing.
That's right.
So I started putting $50 a month into a mutual fund.
Yeah.
And then I raised it to 100 and it increased as I could afford it.
Right.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it works.
All the smart accountants I ever talked to throughout my life told me, do not count on Social Security.
Right. Well, it's interesting with both our kids in their 20s going into the workforce, that both their scenarios that their employers are kind of forcing their hand to invest into what they have available for them, the 401ks,
and then the employers will match it. And
exactly.
That's the force.
Yeah. So that's the
so
qualified
it's
account.
Interesting that it's
do it,
and then do something on your own. I'm having the conversation with my own young adults.
Yeah.
That is, look, you're making all this money instead of like the extra trip to Wendy's.
Right.
Just $10 a week will go a long way.
No question about it.
With compounding interest over the next 30 or 40 years.
Right.
And the social, I guess back to the thing. It's like Social Security, like people don't touch my social, you can't do any of it. And I know people who are getting benefit of this windfall.
Yeah.
And they're all celebrating. Wow, our people are blah, blah, blah. I'm like,
it's not right.
It's not right.
No.
It's not right. You didn't pay in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a lot of things when you're a small business person, which all three of us are. There are all kinds of provisions in federal law, like maternity leave for the dads and all this stuff. Well, we can't do any of that.
Right.
What, if my wife has a baby, like I'm going to take 2 months off, like Pete Buttigieg did. That's crazy.
Well, and their response would be, well, go work for the government then.
Yeah.
And my response is, well, who's going to pay for it if everybody's doing that?
Right. Exactly.
Right? So,
exactly right, man.
Yeah.
We need to update our viewers and listeners. Once again, They reversed the reversal on which Brett has followed this story. And unbelievably enough, while we were having our show last week, a full panel of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned its own small panel. So it's the same circuit overturning the earlier decision from 2 weeks prior.
All right, so let's break this down.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Let's do some appellate breakdown.
Yeah, do it, man.
There was a lawsuit
Well, we
filed.
didn't set this. What we're talking about
Steve,
here.
if you could explain, basically, it's a reporting law.
Yeah, this is the law we've talked about. I forget what it's called. This is the law we've talked about that requires
the Corporate Transparency Act,
the Corporate
CTA.
Transparency Act, which is Orwellian. And
Department of Treasury, IRS, all these agencies.
That means you have to tell the government who's involved in your LLC, and if you don't, you're subject, in theory, to $500 a day if you haven't done it.
And they carved out banks and big corporations.
So only the small businesses have to do it. And why on earth would the government want to know everything about your small business? You decide. Either way,
right?
It seems sort of Orwellian. So we have been following it, and it turns out that somebody predictably challenged the law as being unconstitutional. And this was, I forget where the original action was filed, but in a federal court. And the challenger said, "Look, this is unconstitutional. We need you to prevent the government from enforcing this law right now."
I think, Steve, the plaintiff, the lead plaintiff, was the NFIB.
The NFIB, and I forget what jurisdiction it was originally.
I imagine
in the South.
Turns out to be the Fifth Circuit. But anyway,
anyway,
the trial court doesn't issue the injunction. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So the trial court says, no, we're not going to give you an injunction. And the injunction is fancy talk for saying you're not allowed to enforce this law, government, until we figure it out.
The trial court did issue.
I would say the trial court issues the injunction.
Yeah, they put the stay on.
That's right. So the trial court issues the injunction and stays the enforcement. Stay meaning postpones it, doesn't let the government enforce it until there's a chance for full legal review of whether it's constitutional. The government appeals, of course, because they want your information, to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, the federal circuit. And that goes to a panel of judges. And the Fifth Circuit reversed the trial court and said, no, we're going to let you enforce it, government. And then the plaintiffs said, we want you, the Fifth Circuit, to conduct something called en banc review. En banc means there's a group of judges. All of them sit in the Fifth Circuit. In any given case, you're not going to have all of them assigned to your case. So if the judges assigned to your case don't agree with you, you get to ask the Fifth Circuit, the Sixth Circuit, any of the federal circuits to review it again en banc, meaning, all right, we don't like what you little group of judges did. We're going to ask the big group to look at what you did and overrule you because we think you're wrong. And that's what happened here. So after en banc review, the Fifth Circuit has said, no, we're gonna maintain the injunction. In other words, government, you're not allowed to enforce it. So we started with no enforcement. We went to enforcement. Now we're back to no enforcement, which really means now everything is just on hold until the courts figure out whether this is constitutional or not.
Okay.
Right.
Is there another step to this at all? I mean, is it done?
In theory,
this en banc?
No, in theory. So all we're talking about whether the trial court properly issued the temporary injunction, meaning the temporary stay, postponement of the statute. That decision is based upon a number of factors, like what's the likelihood of success? Is there going to be irreparable harm if we don't stay the enforcement? There's a whole host of factors I've discussed in other episodes. It is not to say that the law is constitutional or unconstitutional, although that is a consideration. The likelihood of success on the merits is a consideration.
Yeah.
So it's only that decision that has been appealed, and it's only that decision that en banc review decided that we're not going to enforce it. In theory, and this has happened in our recent times and things like some of these election provisions, the border provisions, the next step could be asking the U.S. Supreme Court to review whether that injunction, the temporary stay, was appropriate. And all of this to say, or all the while pending whether or not a decision on the merits is ever going to come. Who knows? Sometimes it never does. Yeah. Sometimes it sort of dies on the vine. That's what's happened with things like Biden's loan forgiveness and some other nonsense.
I think that's likely to happen, Steve, because we have a new president coming in on J20.
Yep.
And I can see Trump, almost immediately telling Treasury to withdraw this regulation.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think he'll do it.
But look, I hear this screwed up all the time. and not for any political reason or not for any bad faith reason, but people screw up what this actually means. And all we're talking about in reality is a little bit of procedural stuff.
Right.
It's only whether or not we can enforce the law right now, not whether the law is constitutional.
Right.
So when you hear something like Amy Coney Barrett, I think which one she didn't strike down or didn't stay, and everybody was up in arms, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, listen, it's only whether or not there should have been an injunction or not, or a temporary stay of the enforcement. It's not a decision on the merits. However, sometimes it's about the same as a decision on the merits because that is one of the criteria, and it may be enough, depending on how they write such a decision, to sort of quell the thing on the vine, and nobody ever pursues it because the U.S. Supreme Court can telegraph what they're going to do or where it would go should it ever get back up to them on the merits.
This is pretty onerous because if there is some kind of conclusion in a trial against somebody who doesn't comply with this regulation, should it ever go into effect again, if there's willfulness in your noncompliance, there is jail time built into the penalty structure for not complying with this bill.
Right.
So it is a little like, bootstrapping, Trump's little reporting thing that, turned into a felony that, potentially could put him in Rikers.
This is the issue here is this constant yin and yang in our country between freedom and I'll call it security. And I've always said we could have absolute security in our country. We could create a no crime environment. It's really easy.
Yeah.
All you have to do is take everybody's guns and put the jackboots on the ground, guarding every single corner. The problem is then the government has all the authority and all the power.
Yeah.
And we know where that goes.
Yeah.
So we want some of that.
It goes to the Hunger Games.
That's right.
Well, yeah.
You know where that goes. All you have to do is study history in the last century.
Yeah.
But we want some of that, we want to keep it in check at the same time. So we've got this yin and the yang. And the sacrifice for our freedom is a little bit of our safety.
And that's why I think police officers and people going in the military, one of their initial things to do before they become, official, is a pledge to uphold the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Because that has all the personal freedoms and rights built into it that they're saying they're going to uphold the Constitution and this is swear allegiance to it.
This is why when I'm asked, like, this is going to sound so, I've said it before, but it's like people go crazy. Their toes curl up when I say stuff like this. But it's like, I don't care if we have a bunch of racist cops, as long as we're enforcing the law the way it should be enforced.
Right.
What people think is ungovernable. You cannot legislate what people think, what people are, or what their true motives are.
Right.
But you can enforce our constitutional freedoms to combat that. So if there is a police stop of a car and it shouldn't have been there and is motivated by racism, well then damn it, we need to go ferret that out, apply the Fourth Amendment to it, and litigate it and stop it. And obviously I'm not suggesting we want to hire a bunch of racist cops. But what I'm saying is we should have protections in place to prevent it. And the government telling you not to be racist is never going to result in you not being racist, and maybe the opposite, in fact.
Right.
That has to change at the cultural level.
Well, like this Luigi Mangione guy's turned into this cult hero because he went after the healthcare, vice president or president of, so somehow that got twisted into like he's the hero for reform of the healthcare system. Which is ridiculous.
Right, it's stupid. There are ways to do it. So like in the police officers, the government actors, whatever they are, you're never going to get a wholesome group of people that thinks the way you want them to think.
No.
But what you can do is apply the rules and the laws in a way that smokes it out when they act on their ill intent. Because guess what? We're all human. We're all subject to bad actions. And then the question is, what do we do? So we've created a system in our country that tries to balance both. It tries to balance our freedom against our safety, and it sort of goes. Now, the reason this is relevant to this corporate nonsense act is because, in theory, I guess, they would be saying, we don't want any secret corporations funding stuff that we don't like. Well, that sounds great on its face because you would be saying, well, that we don't want terrorists having secret corporations. Until you get the bad actors doing things with that information that that's not really for its intended purpose. Now they're just taking down names so they can come later get information from you or force you to do something, or maybe get into your house, whatever they're going to do.
Right.
And you would say, well, they won't do that because they're the guy. I would say, look, I don't trust them because they're human, because we can't tell if a cop is racist. We can't tell that going in.
Yeah.
And when we can tell, we get rid of them. But most of the time you can't.
Well,
I use racism only as a metaphorical euphemism.
But getting back to the terrorism for a minute, because I think this same argument applies there. If you listen to all the talking heads on radio, TV, or social media, the leading talking heads are all horrified that the two drivers of these EVs that went through the crowd and then the one in Vegas that exploded underneath the canopy at the Trump Hotel. That guy was active duty Special Forces Green Beret, the one in Las Vegas that blew up the Cybertruck. The other guy was retired military, had been in for I forget how many years.
This is the guy from the Texas guy.
Yeah, Jabbar.
Yeah.
He was retired military, or I should say honorably discharged military. And both of them evidently had social media stuff, expressing their support for extremism of one kind or another, including videos of them, whatever. And the talking heads are all like, well, we should have stopped them. And I'm like, well, what were you going to stop them for? Expressing an opinion? It's like these Antifada protesters in New York. They may have broken that they needed a permit to do the demonstration, to rent the street for the day. Okay, clear the street for that reason. But the idea that they don't have the right to say crazy shit about Israel.
That's right.
Or these guys say crazy shit about ISIS. I support ISIS. That's not the country that we live in, or at least it never was up until this moment. But people are talking like it's now the FBI's job as a transition to go from worrying about misdemeanor people on January 6th, like going after every little old lady who went there on vacation and entered the building and committed a misdemeanor. So, we got to go after those people. No. Now we want the FBI to scour the internet for people who say, I like the Ku Klux Klan, or I like Nazis, or I like Hamas, or I like ISIS. Well, no, I don't want the FBI doing that.
Right.
No.
I mean, this talk has existed since the beginning of man.
Yeah.
It's just now on an amplification of 100 times because of social media or the internet.
Now, should
it's
the FBI...
It's always been there, but no.
The FBI should know who these people
exactly.
are. But they should not be monitoring them with the intent to prosecute.
But just monitor knowing that they're there.
Right.
Okay.
For their thoughts.
The
now, there are some crimes.
Yeah, there are some crimes
that you can commit.
That's right.
Like if you make a threat to somebody,
right,
an active threat.
Look at that Jew. Let's go hang that Jew. Well, then, hey, dude, you need to be arrested for that.
So the FBI does monitor some of that stuff, and there's again, we're in this balance.
Yeah.
How far do we want authorities to go?
Exactly.
I don't profess to have the
answers. And
that's
that tension you were talking about.
That's right. I don't profess to have the answers, but this comes up all the time, and it used to come up all the time in debates with some of my friends about. There used to be the State Route 23 corridor heading from all the way down to from where literally Detroit down to Portsmouth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what would happen is people would run dope back and forth. And if you're driving on 23, you get pulled over for really twitching funny. They would pull you over and search your car. And people are like, well, I don't mind them searching my car because, I'm not doing anything wrong.
Right.
And I would say, what about your house? Well, they can come look around my house all they want because I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, what about your bedroom? They can come look around my bedroom because I'm not doing anything wrong.
Wow.
And, fair enough. And then you ask the one question, well, what if the police are corrupt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if the police are corrupt? And this is back to my point.
It should be your decision. So
right.
if I get pulled over and I know I'm righteous and I just want to get the incident over with quick.
Search my car. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've got a box truck. It's a 15-foot box truck, and I'm coming back from Canada, and it's chock full of used automotive parts that I'm going to refurbish. Do I want to sit there all day waiting for this guy to go get a warrant and all that? Dude, look, here, roll up the door, have at it, knock yourself out.
See, I would say no to that, and mostly because I can. And look, you can say that's obstructionist, you can say that's whatever you want, but
right.
No, you can't
have
search
the right
my car.
to do that.
You can't search my car. You can't search my house. You can't come in. Now I might be, and maybe in real time I might go a different direction, and it's because I have seen too much of this. I have seen too much where where there are bad actors, not just the bad guys on the street, but there's sometimes some bad actors in the police force,
for sure,
or in the government,
for sure,
or in the prosecutor's office.
Yeah.
And look, as you often say, I love everybody, but I also understand that we're all human. We're all subject to those human motivations that sometimes get the better of us.
Yeah.
And this is why we have the Fourth Amendment. This is why we have these protections. This is why we limit the FBI's authority to do these things, but we want them to do it at the same time. This is that sort of shell, or that competing interest that we have. It's imperfect.
Yeah.
Totally imperfect.
Right.
But we can't get rid of both either.
This other line of discussion that's going on right now is like, well, both guys were soldiers, so the Army needs to, like, this is something new. And I'm like, well, not really. Like, Lee Harvey Oswald had a marksmanship badge from the U.S. Marine Corps. He's a guy that, killed Kennedy. And so, like, Major Hassan, the Army doctor, went into the cafeteria where nobody's armed, and he killed, I don't know how many, 15 or 20 people with his 9mm. And so there's like Tim McVeigh. There's another veteran, blew up the Oklahoma.
Look, we would like to think we have
perfect soldiers, but we don't.
We have a government police force in place to smoke this stuff out and stop it. I want that to happen. I want also to have the protections of our individual freedoms. Yeah. And the two things are inconsistent almost intentionally.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to get your head around.
Yeah.
So do we give the government carte blanche authority to dig into our most personal affairs so we can make sure there is never any sort of terrorist attack? Well, we would all say, yes, do that. Well, we don't want terrorism.
I'll give you a good example. At one of those honorific speeches, a graduation speech, they're replaying this. Biden announced as president, I think it was U.S. Military Academy or something, where he said the greatest internal threat in America to national security is white
supremacy.
Right. And so he instructed the military to go through every barracks, flip over the mattresses, like we're gonna seek out all the white supremacists. And I think it was under like 6 people that they found had any connections with any white.
Maybe they would never act on it. Maybe they would act on it.
Out of millions.
Who knows? Who knows? But the point of all this is to say, I think the answer is not where people are looking necessarily. The answer is culturally. Why do people hate our country? Within.
Right.
Like, what's going on culturally where people hate our country?
Yeah.
And I guess one side would say we're just tired of the racist white men governing everything. On the other side, we're going to say, no, we're not. It's like, but this is the cultural debate that's going on.
Yeah.
And that only we've talked about this in other contexts. It's like, why do we even have to have this discussion?
It's crazy.
It's crazy. We should all be outraged by the fact that there has been a terrorist attack killing our citizens. It makes me sad.
Right.
It makes me while I'm watching the Ohio State football game or getting ready to watch the Ohio State football game, this crap is going on.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, damn, imagine what that was like on that street with those people.
Yeah.
And your loved one is dead. Like, imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
And then, and instead people are making,
right. You hear politicians politicizing it.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. It's just this is not the moment.
It's not the moment.
Well, there may never be a moment. It's not a moment at all.
This is a terrorist act, unjustifiable on any level, killing our citizens. The same as the United Healthcare killing, the same as any other.
Yeah.
And
nonsense.
But we
lighting that lady on fire in the subway.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we want to blame though. That's just us.
One side wants to politicize it to gain.
We want somebody
support.
to be taken down. It's your fault, and why? That's just us. That's what we want to happen, but it's not right.
But I won't trade my freedom for the safety.
No.
So because then you end up with the government with an agenda, and next thing you know, it's turning on you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a strategy to try to Okay, this sounds partisan, but Jamie Raskin, who's a congressman, I believe from New York, could have that wrong, but I forget what state. But he put out an operational concept to deny Trump the presidency on January 6th when they do the election count in Congress.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy. So in 2022, because of some of the messiness in the election count in the previous election, where Trump still maintains to this day he got screwed, there is this counting act, election counting act of 2022 that was passed, and it was bipartisan. And basically, what you need to throw out the Electoral College's results from a state, or from all the states for that matter, is to get that vote where you would need at least more than 50% to say we're throwing out the Electoral College vote, is you need 20% of each house, which either of the two parties could muster 20%, okay. Right? I mean, just numerically.
Yeah, right.
I'm not saying they would convince 20%, but getting 20% of the Democrats would be basically, you would need like 40 people. And the same with the Republicans.
You could find 40.
You could find 40 nutty people who say, oh, yeah, we want to have a debate and vote on throwing out the Electoral College. So that's what Jamie Raskin was talking about, trying to do to Trump, and I just don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening. It sounds an awful lot like the same crap that they're complaining about 4 years ago.
So the results would then be based on just the general election.
I don't know.
Percentages.
No, there's a procedure where it goes to, like, I think it would go back to the vice president. We'd have to look at the procedure.
Right.
But I think it resulted in Kamala Harris getting elected president.
For God's sakes, yeah.
I think, somebody's going to hopefully comment on it. Tell us I'm wrong.
Wow.
But I think that was the outcome of all this.
The other thing that's feeding into Congress right now is the tech bros that are supporting Trump, like, Vivek, Ramaswamy, and Elon Musk. These two guys like hiring H-1B visa holders, right? This is where every year 85,000 H-1Bs are allowed to be issued by the federal government. And with some workarounds, it's almost really double that, because you can bring them in on other kinds of visas and then convert it later. Mm-hmm. So roughly, let's say, for our sake of argument, 200,000 a year of these H-1Bs. And it's supposed to be given in a situation where a corporation cannot find the same talent, the same kind of educated person in America willing to take the job. But what has happened in reality, and we talked about this down at Disney, Disney's employees had to train their H-1B replacement coming in from like India and China. Okay. They had to train the person who's taking their job. So this was a case where Disney already had trained software engineers. But these H-1B guys, they're going to come in and work for half the money, right? Okay. And so instead of bringing in new talent that's needed for new slots, it's just a way to bring in cheap labor. And so the tech bros in MAGA want to keep that going. But the MAGA movement's all about, like, we've had enough of illegal games in immigration. So there is this big internal MAGA debate going on, and that is also feeding into the Mike Johnson speakership thing, because
I love this scenario that everybody's looking at all this movement of he's hiring, he's appointing, and it's like it's internal strife from day one.
Well,
it's good. I mean,
it is good. We need this discussion.
We need this discussion. Who would have ever? This would have never come to light.
That's right.
If everything up to this day had not been put into place.
That's right.
Probably.
Because Kamala would never kill this program.
Right. No.
But people are saying to Trump, we want you to lower the number, like go from 85,000 a year to maybe 25,000. And enforce it. Don't let Disney, turn 1,000 of its CGI, engineers out into the streets unemployed and bring in 1,000 people, to work at half the pay.
All right. Well, that's just changing the rules around it.
That's
Maybe
right.
you don't have to do the numbers, but
That's
you could
right.
just say you can't be.
It's in the details.
Right. It's in the devil's in the details about working.
That's right.
Wow.
It's a big fight. Mike Johnson.
I love it.
I love
it.
He's got to sort of please these Doge guys.
Sure.
Because those are the guys Trump's listening to. But at the same time, he's got Chip Roy and the real MAGA people saying, "Hey, this program's bullshit."
And like I said from the beginning, I don't think Musk and
Vivek
knew what they're walking into. I kind of wonder.
You wonder. Well, you wonder. What their understanding of what their input's going to result in versus what their actual result will be.
Right.
I mean, because these people, look, politics is politics, folks, and mostly politics is money.
And this is a swamp.
Yeah,
we're talking about.
We're talking about a deep, murky, mucky mess of a swamp.
That's right.
Like, you're not going to find the bottom of that in 4 years.
Right. So we'll see. Today's going to be. There were 15 votes before Johnson was accepted as Speaker.
Yeah, it was.
When Kevin McCarthy got kicked out.
Yeah.
So, God knows what's going to happen today, but
Right.
it's going to be epic. Little Ohio stuff. So, Steve, your commentary on this will be really cool to have here. So, up in Massillon, Ohio area, this came in from our producer Dan's mom. She sent me this case in an email, and I'm so glad she did. So Jackson local schools settled for $450,000 at one of these pronoun cases, similar to the professor down there at it was either Marietta or I think it was Ohio U down there. There was a professor who said, "I'm not calling boys girls. They can't give me a pronoun that doesn't fit the reality." And this lady, this Vivian Garrity, middle school teacher of language arts, was forced to resign. The principal brought her in and said, "You either comply with our pronoun policy," which was based on Biden's Title IX changes that says we're going to protect any gender identity in education. And the U.S. federal court for the Northern District of Ohio made a ruling before this settlement. The ruling said that the policy was compelled speech, so it went against the First Amendment, and that it also violated her right of religious practice, because her objection was not only freedom of speech, but it was also, it's against my religion to, call a tree a horse, or to call a girl a boy, or a boy a girl, or whatever. And the ruling was made in the case in her favor, and before an award was announced by the court, they settled for $450,000. It was two trans students who were demanding that she use the pronouns and the names that they wanted to be used rather than what's on the official roster at the school.
Compelled speech. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, what more could I say? You've just summarized it perfectly.
Yeah.
It's basically an employment suit. This woman was fired because of reasons that she claimed violated her constitutional rights, and specifically her First Amendment right to freedom of speech, or not be forced to compel speech, and her First Amendment right to the free exercise of her religion. Now, it's important to note, none of these things would have applied if it were a private school, at least not like this, because only the government can violate our constitutional rights, folks. Now, private employers can violate maybe your statutory rights, like Title VII, and maybe things that Congress has enshrined into law, but not constitutional rights. So the First Amendment applies only to government action. That's like Constitutional Law 101. So this is a government actor, the school, and the school fired this woman, Garrity, for reasons that she claimed violated her constitutional rights. And it sounds like she filed a lawsuit in federal court. And in the initial decision, what happens here, procedurally speaking, is both sides, the school district certainly filed what's called a motion for summary judgment. They'll start with like a motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim, and then they maybe filed a summary judgment motion. And a summary judgment motion in a civil case is basically one party asking the court to say, look, this is so cut and dried that we win.
Yeah.
We don't even need to have a jury. We win. And maybe this was a 12B motion, which is not summary judgment. It's a legal motion saying there's no claim. The plaintiff here, Garrity, failed to state a claim that is cognizable or recognized by the court. And it sounds like the court said no.
Yeah.
We do not dismiss this case. We're going to find that there is a viable claim. So the case survived motions. And then everybody starts reaching for their pocketbook because things get expensive. And this is all about risk reward. So the school is saying, look, we'd much rather pay her off than go down this rabbit hole of $500,000 in legal fees and still lose, and maybe lose bigger So we're just going to settle the case out of court. And that's how settlements like this happen.
Yeah. I guess that's what it sounds like. And I guess there's a term of art that the gender movement uses called dead naming, and that was in their legal briefs. That this, that's what they were telling the court that the teacher was doing, was dead naming these two kids. And
is that even a legal term? Dead naming?
Dead naming, yeah.
Well, they're trying to inveigle.
That's like talking about your father who's deceased. No, I mean, dead naming.
I guess I didn't know if that, because I've heard that before, and I didn't know if that might have been a.
It's gender terminology.
That it could already have existed, and they
This is woke terminology for referring to me as my old identity.
Okay,
and Brett, if they put it in the briefs and they end up succeeding, then they can point back to it oh, the supporting briefs use this, whatever.
So when she was to bring in that it's constitutionally against my religion, what do you have to bring to the table to prove that?
Well, it's a good question. So you have to, you can't just, this came up a lot.
It seems like you just say that's against my religion. But you've got to prove something, though. How do you prove that?
I don't know what the standard of proof is exactly, but I surmise that the plaintiff here, Garrity, would have to prove that she is a Christian, because that's what she claimed.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And that her religion, her deeply held religious beliefs, will not permit her to use this terminology.
Yeah.
Now, how do you prove that? It could just be her testimony.
Okay.
But then it would sort of shift over to the other side to say, well, that's interesting because you've been going to the Church of Satan for your entire life.
Well,
it's funny because
then it kind of gets into you've been to church 3 times this year, Easter, Christmas, and a wedding.
So right. And then that would become a jury question, whether the jury would believe that it is, in fact, her deeply held religious belief. That's one of the elements that this woman would have to prove in court. Okay. And there is no, I guess, roadmap as to exactly how she proves it, although the obvious way would be she would just go in and testify.
Well, Steve, and there are precedents for proving that you have a religious belief in, like, COVID cases.
Right. I was going to say, this came up a lot in COVID.
Sure. Blood transfusions with, what is it?
The Christian Scientists.
Thank you. The Christian Scientists.
Okay.
Like, your kid's going to die of leukemia unless and they just go, you can't put somebody else's blood in my child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they have to prove it that they're sincerely held religious.
It's got to be sincere. So how do you prove sincerely? Well, I mean, good guess. I mean, take a guess. And maybe I have to testify. And then the other side is going to say, well, that's sort of interesting because we found somebody who's going to come in and say that you have scoffed at Christianity your entire life.
Talk about slippery slope of the religious stuff. It's it sounds like
the peyote smoking Indian thing. Like they got basically federal court permission.
The Rasta guys went through this litigation. It's like, this is our free exercise of our religion. So there's all of that.
We smoke in church.
That's you get the big Bob Marley. But you
Yaman.
It's a Yaman. It's an interesting lawsuit, and like you said, Norm, there was a lot of this going on during COVID. In fact, I had friends saying, I don't believe in I had friends calling me wanting help drafting their statement to their employer about why they shouldn't be vaccinated because they miraculously all of a sudden became anti-abortion and there were stem cells or something in the vaccine.
Yeah.
So therefore, they were asking me about getting Bible verses that would support it, and I'd be, it's look. More power to you. If that brought somebody to faith, then
right.
All the better, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
But maybe it was false.
Turning to some Ohio stuff, I had said on the show, because I thought the state legislature had presented these 40 or 30 or these huge number of lame duck session bills to DeWine right after they passed them. You would think, well, they didn't. They presented most of these bills to the governor just this week on Monday, including that House Bill 8.
Yeah.
And so Governor DeWine has until, I think, January the 9th is the deadline to line item veto if there's any funding attached to any of these things, or to sign them, or to veto them, or just let them become law after 10 days on his desk. One of the things he signed, and I think Steve, being a trial lawyer, will definitely, this will get his attention and the media, because they like body cam footage from cops. Cops are now under House Bill 315, which DeWine signed, I think, yesterday, allows for law enforcement agencies to charge $75 per hour of body cam vid with a cap of $750 for the entire request. And, you know, that's definitely going to affect what reporters and what attorneys are able to do, because some of these clients aren't going to have the $750.
Well, look, who's got to pay it?
The requester, the member of the public who wants this public record is now going to have to pay $75.
Don't we three own those cameras?
Yes.
In essence, we kind of paid for them, right?
So what they do, according to the testimony from the police, is they redact things out of. So they have to have an editor go through everything that's requested, and they're saying we don't have money in the budget to do that. It sounds a little weak to me.
Yeah.
It sounds like a way to turn down frivolous requests, because obviously if Steve has a serious case,
I get it anyway.
He's going to get it anyway.
I get it. So, but let's explain this.
Okay.
I believe they are talking about a private citizen requesting body cam footage. And let me tell you something.
Going back to frivolous, then, basically, okay.
Or for whatever reason, they may not.
Maybe. Well, maybe that's true.
There's no frivolous request because you're allowed to have it.
Yeah.
And
you could see why a news reporter would want.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
They would want.
Now, here's the thing. I have a case. Say, Norm, you're charged with disorderly conduct because on New Year's you got a little tipsy, too much to drink, and you
took a swipe at somebody, whatever.
And you got mouthy with a cop, and there's 4 cops surrounding you, and you're on body cam telling them to go do something to their mothers. And so
a friend of mine did call a cop Dick Tracy right to his face.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's almost a compliment. So you get charged with obstruction of official business or something, disorderly conduct, and you call me ring-a-ling-a-ling, and I say, Norm, I'll be happy to represent you. First thing I'm going to do is plead you not guilty and file what's called a demand for discovery. That is going to require the prosecutor in the case to supply me with all relevant information. I'm using civilian language, all relevant information, and that would include, in your case, the body cam footage by all the cops. And they'll give it to me, and that's not going to cost me a penny.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to give it to me.
Okay.
And I'll get it. I don't think this law is going to change any of that.
Okay.
I will say this though, we used to beg for the days back before body cam footage that we would have body cam footage, and now I sometimes rue the day that I have body cam footage because my workload has increased substantially, and I'm saying this for a reason, because now if I get body cam footage, I would have 4 different camera angles for your incident, and say it's a 2-hour incident.
Wow.
Do the math. I got to go through it
all day,
and it's maddening.
Yeah,
and it's almost malpractice not to go through it all. So now I've employed investigators and clerks and people to go through it and summarize it for me, and then try to highlight the stuff that I should go watch.
Make a transcript.
Make it. I have AI transcripts of it. I mean, it is maddening.
Wow.
And I'm bringing this up not to say, oh, woe is me for having to do this work, but it's also true on the other side. There's hours of this stuff, and in order to maintain it, it costs money. In order to go through and redact it, it costs money. Now, I'm not suggesting that that the citizens should pay extra for it, but the opposite would be that we as taxpayers have to pay for the news getting this information.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily disagree with this. So if a private citizen wants the information, they're free to get it, but it doesn't mean it's free to get it.
Yeah.
Right.
And that price per hour is not extremely exorbitant.
No, it's not crazy
compared to looking at video editors and such. Yeah. I mean, it's not like $200 an hour.
We go through video footage down here, and it's a process.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. If it doesn't affect people in their defense, then I'm far less worried about it.
If I had to pay for that to get it defending somebody, I would be stomping my feet, throwing a tantrum, claiming this is a constitutional problem.
Okay.
Because or at least a statutory problem, because I'm entitled to discovery, and it becomes constitutional if it's helpful evidence to me.
Okay.
But no, I don't see this as a.
And you may have an indigent client,
and the government would have to pay for it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think this case out of Mansfield is super interesting. So, I'll tell you the story and then get your comments. So, if you guys hadn't seen this is a crazy thing. 43 years ago, a waitress, 26 years old at the time, Deborah Lee Miller, was murdered. In 1981, she was murdered, and They upstairs was a man that was interviewed at the time, way back in 1981. And, there was nothing to tie him to the murder. And, they talked to several other people. This waitress had gone out with several Mansfield Police Department officers. There was a feeling that they were slow walking the case because maybe one of them did it, or the scandal would come out that she was dating cops. If you can imagine that as a scandal anyway. But what they did is the cold case unit at Mansfield brought this case up 4 or 5 times. And the most recent time that they went over the case again, fresh, was to interview this guy again. And this guy got spooked, and he ran to West Virginia and left guns in his apartment, left guns behind in the apartment. And they brought in the ATF, and they said, hey, we got a way to get his DNA sample now. Let's charge him on these gun crimes, some of the guns he wasn't allowed to have, or he stored them wrong, or whatever, he abandoned them, whatever. And the U.S. Marshals and the SWAT unit in Canton, Ohio, at this motel where they found him after he was forced back to Ohio on these gun charges, he would not go peacefully, so they shot him. They got a DNA sample. The DNA sample proved conclusively that he, in fact, was the murderer of this girl 43 years ago.
How about that?
How about that, man?
Finally solved.
Wow. I mean...
Yeah, look, there is this happens a lot. There's a lot of DNA on file and in cold case units whose job it is to go out and sort of make these comparisons. But I think sadly the resources to really, really do that and explore that stuff are pretty limited. And you wonder how many we could solve.
Yeah,
if we really put eyes on all of it. But right. And look, I'm not suggesting there's resources to do it. There just simply aren't. But well, look, we'll call that our justice for all.
Yeah,
we've had it. Let's close up here. Things that the outrageously wonderful things. What's your outrage of the week, Norm?
Well, my outrage of the week is this: President Biden. Forget all his pardons. Now he's giving medals out. So 2 of the medals he's giving out are Presidential Citizens Medals, and he's giving one each to Benny Thompson and Liz Cheney for their magnificent work on the January 6th committee in Congress, which, of course, was so crooked and so wrong and so one-sided. It was such a star chamber. There was no cross-examination allowed of the witnesses. They did not keep the records of interviews and depositions and video. And Kevin McCarthy, Republican minority leader at the time in the House, was not allowed to choose his own members of the committee, which is just standard routine when they make up a committee. They say to the Republican or the Democrat head of in each party, okay, who do you want to appoint to this special committee? And Kevin McCarthy, Nancy Pelosi turned down Kevin McCarthy's list of participants, and then she cherry-picked her 2 favorite Republicans. So at any rate, Biden's going to give a medal to each of these 2 people for, one of the most egregious committees in the history of America. It was so poorly run and ill-advised, and really these 2 people should probably be investigated by the incoming Justice Department rather than getting medals. That's my outrage.
Yeah. Wonderful. This is kind of a funny thing. I've never got into vanity plates for my car, but they are interesting seeing them.
As my buddy once said, vanity plates are just that.
Yeah, exactly. So in 2023, 931 applications were rejected as of early December. And some that didn't make it were cocaine, Kokaane, heroin, dog turd, and IH8 Ohio.
Oh my God!
I hate Ohio.
Wow.
I don't think that should be rejected.
It's just interesting what gets not necessarily what does get rejected, but what was actually submitted.
Yeah. Some creative
tried
people
to get through, but there's a whole list of.
So do you guys know who Key and Peele are? The 2 comedians that.
Yeah.
Okay. They had this joke where the one guy the tall of the two, the taller of the two, comes into as a substitute teacher, and he mispronounces the names of all the students. Like he calls Aaron Aaron, right? Because there's two A's, right? And of course the student says, "That's not how you say my name. My name's Aaron." And he goes, "Hey, don't mess with me." And he gets all so he pronounces the name of this girl named Jacqueline, and he calls her Jay Quillen. I saw a license plate that says Jay Quillen. That fell out of my chair, man.
A couple others like Poopy too.
Yeah,
some of these I can't even say. Or I got to look. I'm going, what are they trying to say with that?
Yeah,
I have to really, really look. But it's just interesting. I always forget that a list comes out this time of year of like what didn't make it for Vanity Police. Or just again, what people try to push through.
Right. That's beautiful, man.
Oh man.
You got a wonderful Steve?
Yeah. Or? Look, my outrageous is this politicization. I can't even say that word.
Politicization
of the terrorist attacks. Look,
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
It is outrageous.
Look, everybody should feel the same about this. People are dead, and that's awful.
Yeah.
That's awful. My wonderful. Are we doing a wonderful?
Yeah, do a wonderful. I got one too.
My wonderful is not only did Ohio State win.
Yeah.
All right, so we won. But that's not my wonderful. My wonderful is that I saw, and this is sort of hearkening back to our previous conversation about how I think things are changing a little bit. Mm-hmm. I saw more often than not the star players not banging their chest. Now, there's one exception. I'm not going to go into him, but there was most of the players were not banging their chest saying, "Look at me." They were instead thanking their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I even saw one of the coaches.
Yeah.
And look, believe or not believe, this is a marked change from an era that we lived in, where it was like me. And look, it might not even be genuine. For these folks.
Yeah.
I think it is. I mean, there was actually baptisms going on at the Ohio State campus led by football players back in the fall.
Yeah.
But it does show a little bit of humility.
It does.
And whether it's fake or not fake, it is a rejection of what I guess C.S. Lewis would call the worst sin of all, and that's pride.
Yeah.
And sort of this a little bit of humble humility to thank a higher power for what you have gotten or what has happened, what the gift you're given, etc. Your talent, whatever it is. It wasn't just me. It was about something a little bit more important than that. So
that is great.
That's wonderful.
I
love seeing it.
What did Rush Limbaugh? I always liked that Rush Limbaugh always used to say, "A talent on loan from God."
Yes,
that's right.
With one hand
some people
tied.
just were offended by that. But think about it, though.
Yeah.
Well, look,
with half my brain tied behind my back.
I mean,
it's such a great way to put it.
Whether you liked him or not. Think about that.
Oh, he was a hell of a broadcaster.
Heck yeah.
Even if you disagreed.
Exactly.
I don't know the Bible well enough to know the exact side of the parable, but there's a parable of the talents, which sort of the idea is like God gives you talent.
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
Right.
How it's yours to have.
Yeah.
Right.
What are you going to do with it?
Right.
And then forgiveness, because the less talented, brother, right? He blew all his money. And then he comes back to his father and the good son who,
Well, that's the prodigal child. Right?
Yeah, right. So even when you waste your talent, if you humble yourself before God and
come
ask
back to the Father,
that you'll be forgiven.
The gate is always open.
Just a complete,
Yeah.
And thanks to Martin Luther, because we all get to read the Bible and we all get to interpret it without having somebody cram it down.
Right.
Yeah, he's actually considered kind of a hero of the Catholic Church in many regards.
Yeah.
So my wonderful thing, and this will sound like I'm Scrooge, but I do love this. ABC News settled with President Trump on the libel, defamation, $15 million, and George Stephanopoulos, the guy who called Trump a racist like 12 times on rapist on national television. He himself has to pay $1 million of it and do an on-air apology, which I don't think he's done.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Wow.
It doesn't get much
better. So look,
that's
a heck of a thing to prove, because you have to prove actual malice. And I do a lawyer talk, my other podcast where I talk to law students about this. And there's a great old movie called Absence of Malice with Wilford Brimley.
Yeah.
Wilford Brimley, Paul Newman, and Sally Field.
A great movie.
Great movie. Check it out, because Wilford Brimley puts on a big dip. He's like, absence malice. You ain't gonna, it's like you got to prove actual malice, meaning Trump's team had to actually prove to win this case. Now it's settled, sort of probably for the same reasons the other one settled.
Yeah.
They had to prove that what's his name, Stephanopoulos did this with the specific intent of causing malicious harm to Trump.
And I think what they had was a deposition where Stephanopoulos' producer had told him,
don't
before
do this. It wasn't rape. It wasn't rape.
Because
the
jury in the E. Jean Carroll case specifically came back and said, we do not assent to the count of rape.
Right. It was an assault or something else.
Something else, but it wasn't that.
Well, look, it's been another riveting show here, January 3rd, 2025. We are coming at you, Common Sense Ohio. I'm going to wrap it up quickly, but check out commonsenseohioshow.com. Check us out on the socials, like, share, do whatever you got to do, because we are coming at you each and every week right from the middle from Studio C.